Our topic this evening is Body-Mind Connect in the Classical Arts. And we have with us a panel of celebrities who need no introduction. To my immediate left is Mr. Shakti Mayra. Mr. Shakti Mayra has been part of this series and he has been our panelist in one of the discussions held a year ago. He is a critically acclaimed artist philosopher. His work as a sculptor, painter, and print has been widely exhibited and largely centered in a Buddhism-inspired spirituality. It is in the collections of National Gallery of Modern Art in India and private collections around the world. He has been invited to speak at several international events, including International Arts Education Symposium in Seoul, the Mystics and Scientists Conference in the UK, and the Edinburgh International Festival. Dr. Alka Raghuvanshi, again a very well-known personality, a passionate advocate of all forms of art, a writer, artist, journalist, and curator. Having trained at the Goldsmiths College, London, and the Museum of Modern Art in Oxford, she has also written many books. A Moment in Time with Legends of Indian Arts in 1996, Pathfinders, Artists of One World 2002, Odyssey, The Dance Divine 2007, to mention a few. We have with us our next panelist, Padma Shri Geeta Chandran, dancer and choreographer. She is a renowned artist who has synthesized the knowledge she received from her gurus to imprint Bharatanatyam with her personal vision of the dance. In her dance presentations, Geeta Chandran skillfully weaves abstract notions of joy, beauty, values, aspirations, myth, and spirituality. She was recently honored with the Nirbhaya Puraskar, I think last week. All right? Finally, among the panelists is Shobna Narayan. Shobna ji is a famous and recognized Indian Kathak dancer. She is taken by the youth of today as pioneer and a role model in successfully combining two parallel careers with success and dignity. She performs in India and abroad and around the world and has been awarded the Padma Shri. She has worked as a career officer for the Indian Audits and Accounts Service, besides a performance all over the world. And to curate this evening's discussion, we have Dr. Suresh Goyal, who has been the Director General of ICCR till very recently. Dr. Goyal is very well known among the art world today as a curator and organizer. I am grateful to Suresh ji to agree and take this discussion forward this evening. Thank you very much.
You can speak from here, no?
Yeah, please.
Thank you very much, and a very good evening to all of you. As the Bayan mentioned, the President of India, this is the second such panel discussion in the series of the Pendulum dialogue which we started last month. The idea is to initiate a dialogue between the artists, the performing artists, the critics, the scholars, and the audience on the subjects which affect or afflict sometimes our common civilizational values, our cultural thoughts, ethos, etc. And in that process to discover what is in the classical arts. Frankly speaking, I have spoken before in terms of a kind of spiritual renaissance, spiritual integration, or integrity if you prefer to call it that. And I have been greatly fond of yoga as a kind of thought, idea which brings everything together in a person. So, but I have no idea really what I would be saying, body and mind connect in the classical arts. And I think the audiences do expect the chairperson or the moderator to begin with some very profound thought. Last time I could not do so, I had no idea. So this time I was going through some books to see what actually I could see. And I came across this excellent book on the transformation of nature in art by Kapila Bhattacharya. And I could not have found a better reference to what it all actually could mean. And therefore, I will basically quote from the book, which refers to the three essays written by A.K. Kumaraswamy. He wrote three essays: Hindu view of art, historical, Hindu view of art, and then theory of beauty, and that beauty is a state. And there, in the first essay, he identifies the core principle of art as yoga and of single-minded concentrated attention beyond individuation. In the second and the third, he used the term beauty for rasa and rasavant. Elaborates upon the concept of perfect harmony between theme and form, content and emotion, inner visualization and external expression, which constitutes significant form. And then he asks, what then is beauty? What is rasa? What is that entitles us to speak of diverse works as beautiful or rasavant? I think that in a sense really sums up what we are talking about. And when he provides an answer, in one sentence he talks about elaborating upon the process of artistic creation from an aesthetic intuition of the poet or creator, the internal experience of this intuition, a vision of beauty, the expression of the experience through external signs, which could be any form, dance, visual arts, sculpture, anything. And I think that by itself sets the path ahead for discussion amongst our panelists. So I have basically, because so that Shakti doesn't feel lonely, I have found something to talk about sculpture and painting, but I will refrain from doing so because I think the panelists they must take the floor and they must really now begin to take the process of this dialogue between scholars, artists, and the audience further. What I thought we should do is that I will ask each of the panelists to present their ideas in about 5 to 7 minutes before the house, after which there will be a conversation between the 4 panelists. And as a moderator, if some idea occurs to me, I will put it forward, otherwise the conversation will be primarily between the panelists, and then it will be thrown open to the audience. The audience is, whatever questions, comments, thoughts they might have, please do keep it till the conversation between the panelists is over, so that there is some structure to the discussions. So then, not in the order in which they sit, but may I now request first Geeta, you to take the floor around 5 to 7 minutes, 10 minutes, it all depends on you.
Thank you, Sureshji. Thank you, Dipan. The question mark did intrigue all of us, but now that the question mark is out, it helps. When you say body in this context, the classical arts, I don't think Shakti is very different out of the whole discussion in that sense. I see, because body can be physical, it can be body. So I think there we all are going to be in the same kind of discussion. So we can't really separate visual arts and performing arts in that sense. But being a dancer, primarily I would talk from the perspective of performer, because that's what I know best. And I'm not wanting to theorize, because Kumaraswamy is wonderful to read, but when you actually sit in the class to teach, it is another system altogether. When we learned the dance form, I don't think we ever realized there was a difference between the body and the mind. It always went hand in hand. And the pedagogy was so beautifully designed that from the first class, when you enter a dance class, we do the Bhumi Pranam. And from that day, it is told to you that this is not just a body exercise that you come for, and that the mind is to be engaged in full measure if you were to be a classical dancer. And we do 3 namaskars, which everybody knows, which is the first namaskar is to that source of energy, the second namaskar is to the guru who gives you the intellect, and the third namaskar is to the audience. So the intellect is such an important part of the entire exercise of involving in the classical dance. And the whole idea is to take the audience through the intellect, through the body, to that source, to that experience of ecstasy or rasa, whatever you call it. So I think it's a given that the body and the mind are always in the arts, particularly in dance. But the problem in dance is that the body is what the people see. The body, you cannot escape the body. So many times the artist might be wonderful, she might have a fantastic mind, but if the body is not something that is prescribed every 10 years, then you will say that the dancer is not worth watching. So somewhere I think there is that problem of body being on the forefront and body being the main vehicle or the instrument through which what you say is said. But people watched Balama. Balama was by no stretch of imagination size 0. And how did she engage? Or for that matter, Kelu Babu. If you see him off stage, a bald man with a dhoti, how did he engage? Biju Maharaji, off stage you see him, how does he engage? So are they actually transcending the body and dancing their minds? And you are actually able to see the mind much more than the body. And this is interesting because as the dancer ages, I think the mind is much more evolved. The mind has so many ideas, and unfortunately the body slowly slows down. And so the whole first 30 to 40 years you invest in acquiring a skill which is essentially driven by the body. And then when you reach a point where all the different elements of dance are actually seeping into you, the body is not there through which you can actually float it. So it's a complicated process, and that's why we say shelf life. But I wonder, when you see Vaijayantimala at 80, she's wonderful. So what, where and how do we connect all these things? I would now like to start with the teaching process, because that's where it all begins, and that's where only after I started teaching did I realize in the pedagogy how beautifully it is woven and how the journey proceeds. The child comes, you teach the body first, in the sense the technique, the grammar, using of the legs, the hands, the face, and all of that. And that takes, say, about 3 to 4 years. And then you come to poetry and interpretation and dance. That's when the first time actually you engage the mind, so to speak. Because so far it's all about coordination, about focus, about, of course the mind is involved, but in a very different dimension. Because there is not much of freedom at that time, because the grammar is what you're trying to make the spine register, in a sense. But when poetry and music comes in, that's the time when I see the child suddenly coming alive, because the music is so rich, the poetry is so rich. And I always say dance is something which has every element. It has mythology, it has philosophy, it has rhythm, it has various aesthetic components, it has yogic positions, it has almost everything. Poetry, of course, literature that we use. So to engage, and how do you at various levels introduce these elements and make the mind engage in each of these is the challenge for the teacher. So when the poetry and the music start engaging the dancer, that's when I think she realizes how much freedom there is in this art form, and how much, once you know the grammar and once you know the vocabulary, how much the mind can then take over, and the grammar of the dance can actually be forgotten, and you just learn to fly with the technique of dance. Now coming to a performer, everybody sees a performance, enjoys it and comes away. And I always tell my students, is there repeat value in that performance? Because many times what happens is, today we are rehearsing to a degree where we say everything has to be perfect, everything has to be absolutely kind of tightly placed. And how much of then creativity does that offer you in terms of improvisation, in terms of creating on stage, in terms of the upaj that the Kathak people talk about, in pure dance and in Abhinaya? That's where I think the real engagement of the mind comes. One line is sung, the musician keeps on singing the line, and the dancer keeps delineating that line to the next time, and she can each time find a new interpretation, new expression, a new kind of a connection. And that's when the mind is actually flying. That part is so beautiful when a dancer arrives there. And I see it in the young dancers when I tell them, I taught a piece, they have perfected the piece, and then I say, now it's your own piece. Now you have to kind of make it your own by coming up with ideas, with coming up with connections, which mean something special to you. And that's how I think the whole thing of engaging the mind comes in and makes the dance your own. Because otherwise, like my teacher used to say, you're a postman, you can take thing and just pass it on. And that's not what we intend to do here as teachers. So I think that engagement where after learning the art form, you play with form, you play with the content, you play with all the elements that you have, and each time the performance is new. And a single piece which you've learned 20 years back, you revisit it and it looks like a new piece, because all that you've gone through, the experience you bring to that particular piece all over again, and you kick yourself sometimes and you say, why didn't you see this before? This is so beautiful, I should have done it in a certain way long back. So that's something that the audience, I think, misses out many times, because they're not discerning in that sense to know how you have reworked a particular piece, revisited a particular piece, and the joy that the artist is getting out of revisiting a piece and recreating a piece after the experience of so many years of learning the piece, staying with the piece, teaching the piece, and then again performing the piece. So this is choreographed. It's always work in progress. So that's because the mind is always moving, the mind is always absorbing, learning, seeing other things, getting inspired by various things. I read Shakti's book on beauty, and it gave me so many different perspectives on beauty. And I just said, wow, everybody has such a different take in that book. So I think we are drawing from every, and that's, I think, again, another thing that we have lost is interdisciplinary work, which used to be our strength. We used to draw from musicians, we used to draw from the authors, from the scholars, from the philosophers. But today, again, I think we've become very myopic in our own disciplines, and we seem to, but the mind engagement comes only when we draw from all this. And that's how the dance gets richer. I'd like to stop here and react when others are talking.
Thank you. Thank you, Gira. That was lovely, really. And I think, did you use the phrase in between somewhere when the dancer begins to see the music? I don't know, but I think somehow, for me particularly, what is important is that the separation between the mind and body, it goes in the process of when you become so totally submerged in what you are doing, that it all becomes one really, and that is what actually I would say is. But this is just what occurred to me, and then the beauty that you referred to. Can be so many different ideas about beauty, not just form, but how you see beauty and how do you relate to the audience on what actually beauty could mean. But anyway, much more of this later. Shakti, may I now request you to take the floor and maybe you could expand on the beauty itself, really. Or,
thank you, Sudhir.
Mike.
And thank you for having me back here. Can you hear?
Yes.
I think there's an expectation that as a visual artist, I will bring some sort of different perspective. And perhaps when one looks at the subject body, mind, and as Geeta talked about the body of the dancer, the equivalent in the world of art would be that the art object is a material object. And there may be some mental transmission, something that the artist may have put into this material object, which hopefully might be transmitted or communicated to the mind of the viewer. And I suppose some of you might feel the frustration that I feel with the contemporary visual arts having become as conceptual as they have. It seems that there's almost a neglect of the material or the body part of art, where that doesn't seem to matter so much. It's really all about the concept that the artist may be playing with or be concerned with. I think a way of sort of a simple, practical way of looking at the mind-body issue is, of course, to, as Geeta said, that they are interdependent, they're codependent. You can't really separate them at any stage. And I think it's useful to think about both perception and experience, which is what artists deal with, and viewers as well, in the four primary levels or dimensions in which this occurs. There is the sensory, which is obviously something where the body is involved. The five senses exist and they are based in the body. Then we have emotions, and emotions are becoming a little bit more mental, but they are also very much connected with the body, and as science is showing us that the emotions actually are an experience of the body to a large extent. Then there is the faculty of thought, which may be the analytical or the rational, that part of the mind. And then there is this fourth thing that is called spirit, that there is something that is more than the senses, that's more than the emotions, that's more than the thinking mind, that is the spiritual or the spirit. And we have great difficulty in and we often get lost when we talk about the spiritual. And I see it much more practical. That there is something to the idea of, for instance, we say somebody is good-spirited, or that you have a feeling about something that it doesn't feel nice. You know, there's something about it which, and if one were to explore this, I think there is a way in which one can, as artists, come up with a couple of things that are tangible. And I would submit that one of them, and a very important one, is the issue of intention or motivation. Now, this is often kind of neglected in this discussion, but I think that it comes through, not in a sensory way perhaps, not in an emotional way perhaps, not in an intellectual way, but there is this other dimension where there is a quality that comes through, which may be the motivation or the intention of the artist. Is it coming from a place where there is a sense of compassion, or a sense of kindness, or a sense of generosity? Is it coming from a place where, is it about ego, is it about the artist, or is it about something else? There are these sort of not so difficult to actually analyze spaces that one can think about what the content of spirit is in the creation of art, and it then becomes embodied, whether it's in a dance performance or it's in a work of art. I think that it does have a life, it does exist within that art form. The other thing that I wanted to talk about a little was the issue of our minds have two very distinct ways in which they respond, or I shouldn't say respond, because I'm going to use that word differently. That when we talk about the sensory perception or an emotional perception, that we have a reactive mind, something that happens snap like that. And then there is another kind of operation of the mind, which is a responsive mind. That it is not just coming as a reaction when you engage with a work of art, or you create a work of art. You're not coming from a reactive space, you're coming from some other space which we could possibly call a more responsive space. And I would argue that this is an important space, because even in, let's say, the sensory, what is the difference between somebody who tastes something and just has a reactive, I like it, I don't like it, and then we talk about somebody who has a cultured taste, who goes beyond just a reactive perception or a reactive experience, but maybe he's a gourmet, maybe he's kind of, there's much more engagement, attention, depth to that person's experience. And I think that when one talks about the classical arts, that is something that is the terrain, that it asks for us to not just deal with art as a reactive experience, but for the richer, more responsive experience. So I wanted to make this distinction, and I think it operates at all the four levels of the mind. Whether it's sensory or it's emotional, you have a reactive emotion, or you have a slightly deeper more responsive motion. Likewise in thought, we have very quick, reactive thoughts, and there's some other thoughts that seem to have more space and more depth to them. And the same thing, of course, operates in the realm of the spirit. The last thing I wanted to say about this was that as a creative person, and the reason why I make art is because I enjoy it. And I don't just enjoy the visual arts, I enjoy music, I enjoy dance. There's something about the arts that is somehow deeply engaging and sustaining. And I would suggest that what we need is art that covers this expanse, these four levels, and that we don't sort of have sort of imbalanced arts. Like the visual arts, I think, in their conceptualism are becoming unbalanced. They're all about just the intellect, they're all just about the thinking mind. Those artists need to be concerned about the sensory component, the emotional component, and the spiritual component. And I think that in a sense, what Geeta is saying, at least that's how it feels to me, is that the way she teaches, the whole process is to develop a kind of integration with the whole being, the sensory, the emotional, the intellectual and the spiritual, they all come together. Thank you.
Thank you, Shakti. That was wonderful. I must say that your take on reactive and responsive minds, or the two parts of the mind, is an idea which actually must be explored further. And the other idea that you refer to, intentions and motivation, and how they affect actually what you set out to present to others, in whether it's in the form of visual art or whatever it is. And I was just thinking that, and Geeta, when you were talking also, technique is one thing, thinking is one thing. You have two chefs, they produce with the identical ingredients, two identical dishes, and one you taste and you say, अच्छा है ये, मजा आ गया. And the other one you say, ठीक है, चलेगा. So what is it actually which makes the difference between the two? Is not technique, is not thinking, but there is something which actually goes into anything which is artistic, which is actually, and what it is, maybe it is reactive, I don't know, but I think we can explore it further in the discussions between the panelists at that time. And now may I request you, Shoma, to take the floor and let us have your take on what body and mind connect to.
Good evening. We've heard from our two panelists before, and I would just like to start with a Kabir ka doha. जब मैं था तो हरि नहीं, जब मैं था तो हरि नहीं, जब हरि है तो मैं नहीं. So the whole thing is that in this body-mind connect, and particularly speaking as a classical artist, while it is I, there is a different, you started with the word rasa, there's a different rasa emanating. But when you become one with the art form and the I vanishes, the rasa is entirely different. So that anubhuti of rasa is different. And that is when the body and the mind connect, it's still at a different level. What she talked about, the training process, that is there in all dance forms which we are doing. the training process of, as well as the experience, but it is that of being completely immersed. As Osho said, that when the dancer becomes the dance, that is what is the ultimate. And that is what each one of us is really in the field of art. At least in most, I can say, in most or in many, that has to be the ultimate. And that is the reason why, when Achan Maharaj, many people who have written about it, that when he came, they said, what is he going to? And then he was as light as a fairy, in fact, lighter than anyone else. So it is that transcending, because he had become the art himself. And that मैं और I had gone. And when you talked about ये अच्छा था, ये अच्छा नहीं, क्या है? There is that something intangible. And that, again, at that point there are two issues that come in. One is that you become the art yourself, and that the rasa emanating is different. But the other aspect is that the receiver may be in another different frame of mind. So you're talking about that reactive and responsive and participative. So where it is also, it depends, the body and mind connect also is equally important in the members of the audience. When you let yourself go, you're able to hear that music, that eternal. But if you come with your baggage and you have not let yourself go in terms of either your body or mind, in terms of whatever likes or dislikes or certain baggages that we all are imbued with, then you will fail to realize the music which might be emanating, but the receptivity, the antenna is not strong enough to receive it. These are now coming to at a different level and coming down from there. When we in Kathak, I can speak of Kathak, which is more the field that I know. एक तो rhythm है, तैयारी क्या तैयारी, हम उपज कर रहे हैं, rhythm में जितना उपज कर रहे हैं जितने, लेकिन अभिनय में जो उपज है, वो that is part of our it used to be part of our teaching process, and it is very much there in the limited sections of the artists, that you take one word or one line and you start emoting to it. So there is no need for me to do only Sancharis to a whole the para, but I can also just take a word. And there is this beautiful and a very famous incident which has been recorded and being retold time and again, and maybe to some members of the audience it might be a repetition, but no harm in repeating it, is that when Ajahn Maharaji was told to do a piece on the word lal, just that one word, पूरी रात निकल गई और वो शब्द ही उसका अभिनय ही नहीं खत्म हुआ. एक शब्द लाल, कोई और कुछ नहीं था, सिर्फ एक शब्द लाल. क्या लाल हो सकता है? एक लाल रंग है, लाल फूल है. You see anger, so you see red. तो सुबह की उषा की लालिमा है, शाम की जो है ट्वाइलाइट की लालिमा अलग है. एवरीथिंग, सिंदूर की लालिमा है, सब कुछ है, बिंदी की लालिमा है. Now everything, that whole, she kept on depicting it. Whole night passed and then finally, Maharaj, कुछ कीजिए कि जिसमें सब कुछ समा जाए. So finally he said, मेरा लाल. In that love, मेरा लाल. And in that love, the entire gamut of emotions the entire gamut of everything that life is all about is there. It was there. So this is one aspect, and of course another one which we say, how a syntax or a comma can make a difference. That can only come around if once, and I am presupposing that the body is already trained. The body is already trained, now it is for us to see and enjoy that inner music. That inner music which comes out of experience, that inner music which comes out of total involvement of immersion and that inner music, that inner harmony, that sound of music which is there, which comes through that speaker. अगर वो एक बहुत ही है कि काना छेड़ो मत जाइयो ना, काना छेड़ो मत जाइयो ना. Now how many times I can do it? I can do काना, I can do काना छेड़ो मत जाइयो ना. Another one, काना छेड़ो मत जाइयो ना. I can go around, I can do my sancharis in many ways and in different emotions at different levels. But if I just change my pause and I say, Kana chhero mat jaiyo na. So now the entire mood has changed, what my meaning has changed, the abhinay has changed, and that comes about only if you have deep immersion, a complete oneness with the art form. That art form, so it is a body and mind connect, which actually you are, there's complete immersion. There's one beautiful piece of Lalit Kishore which I'd like to, ek shab, and I would like to read it out because this is quite famous. अब राधा जो है बैठी है और कितनी तरह से आप उस राधा को कह रहे कि वो उनके डिफरेंट इमोशंस और है लचीले सकुचीले सरसीले सुरसीले से कटीले और कुटीले चटकीले मटकीले से रूप के लुभीले कजरीले उन्मीले पर छीले तिरछीले से हसीले ओ गसीलों से ललित किशोरी झमकीले गर्बीले मानो अति ही रसीले चमकीले और रंगीले है छबीले छकीले अरुणीले से नसीले लाली नैना नंदलाल के नचीले और नुकीले हैं. तो ये जो है इस तरह की. Now here is the body and mind connect not only of the dancer but also of the poet. The poet and the dancer and the music, they all come together. So when teaching is at a different level, performing is at a different level, viewing also has its own body and mind connect at a different level. But finally, what is important is that total immersion, the total being at one with dance, the total actual becoming the dance itself or becoming the art itself, that gives that state of rasa which is beyond everything. And that is where it brings in that total ananda that we all are talking about. When we are talking about the dance and classical dance is a form of yoga and all performing arts are performed because we go through our ashtanga. Yam, niyam, asan, pranayam, pratyahar, dhyana, dharana, samadhi. We can go through that. But what is that samadhi? That samadhi is that actual experience of that beautiful rasa. That state of total submersion, immersion, and beyond yourself. And in that, everything is na. That whole sound of na, which envelops us. And through that, we become one with that rasa, that universal ananda. Thank you.
That was hypnotic really. I mean, as an artist, when you are connecting, when you are immersing yourself in the particular emotion, particular dance that you're performing, but to carry the audience with you, so that audience is actually being one with you. It's a connection not only between the mind and body of the dancer, but the mind of the audiences have to connect to the mind of the dancer or the artist, and that goes for anything really. At least in the case of performing art, you have a person who is presenting those emotions, who is working with, in the case of sculpture Shakti, for example, once you have done a particular piece, how do the viewers, how do the people who come to see, how do they relate to it? When they are seeing it, they are not looking at you. They are looking at something that you have already finished, and there it is for them to interpret. I think we have very rich material for discussion afterwards, and to sum it all, before we start the discussion, you have the floor.
Thank you. As a journalist and a person who writes on art, I just find that I get so mesmerized sometimes when I hear somebody like Shobhaji saying what she did say. I said, wow, this is the real Rasanubhuti, where the artist and the dance, or the art, the medium and the message become one. And that's the place where you really take off into the realm where the dance and the mind are really interacting with each other and being able to share it with the audience or share it with whoever's there, whether it's the musicians or it's the audience. Well, to come back to what I had originally planned to say, was that all the arts, I think, are very sajha. All the classical arts, I don't think there's be any dancer who can say that sculpture does not affect them, or a painter who says music is not something that doesn't bind him with his own work and does not inspire him to an extent. And that goes, and word, of course, is that sole binding factor for all of us, whether it is dancer or a musician. Without sahitya, there can be no music. Okay, debatable, but well, to a large extent. So I think this is the whole process that we're talking about. How, plus, when you're talking of dance, you're talking of transcending the body. Geeta just mentioned about how Bala Saraswati or Biju Maharaj or Kelu Babu or any of the dancers really are able to transcend what is an ordinary body, sometimes not so attractive a body, and yet take it to an extent where you forget the body. The body melts into nothingness. It's the dance, it's what they're trying to portray that takes center stage, and it becomes all important. I think that is the whole kamal really of Indian arts and Indian classical arts specifically. I think it's, and as Geeta said, something very heartbreaking, that by the time you understand the art, the body is gone. And I think that's also a limitation, but I think we're still very fortunate, and look at what happens to contemporary dancers. Their shelf life, quote unquote, is so much shorter, and by the time they're even 35, 38, they just stop dancing. They just cannot dance because that the whole thing is so much about the body. So I think, since we're really blessed, we are blessed. Here we are performing at the age of 70, I mean, Vaidyanti Maharaj or Maharaj, whoever, there. And yet, really, that whole ability to, in fact, I must recount a very beautiful instance that Maharaj says. He said, हर बार कहते हैं, तथै कर जाता हूँ मैं, हर बार जयंती पे कर देता हूँ, पर ये नहीं सोचते हैं कि हर बार उस तथै में मैं क्या नई बात पेश करता हूँ, मैं क्या नई बात कह जाता हूँ. वो उस नई बात को कहने और समझने का जो एक कनेक्शन है, वो माइंड का ही तो है, एक दिल का ही तो है. To come to contemporary arts, as an artist myself, as a painter, and as Surya said very rightly, कि हमने तो create कर दिया. We've created in the privacy, in the aloneness, in the loneliness of our own space of the studio, whether it is the sculpture studio or it is the painter studio. And then the created piece, if you like, is put into a space where it is supposed to interact with the audience, which has to interact with the inanimate in that sense. It's not as if it's not the magic of a performer, of a dancer or a musician. It's the magic that is happened here. It's happened here in my studio. And when I bring that work into the cube, into the white cube of a gallery, how do people respond to it? How will they respond to it? Is that a question in my head? No, never. Because मुझे जो कहना है मैं तो उस पे कैनवस पे कह दिया. So it's not as if I am trying to create something वहाँ पे खड़े होके ऑडियंस का मूड मिजाज देख करके आप when you perform in Vrindavan will be different. When you perform in a very fancy auditorium in Delhi or London, it will be totally different, because that's the kind of choice that you will make of your spaces, of your choreography. So it will definitely be different. We don't have that luxury as artists, as painters, as sculptors. We just don't have that luxury. जो बनाया वो अगर नहीं आया किसी के मन में, किसी के दिल में नहीं उतरा, then the problem it's our failing in a sense, and it can be a very heartbreaking failing. That when you bring something, ये लोग को समझ में नहीं यार ये मॉडल ये एब्स्ट्रैक्ट आर्ट में क्या बोलते हैं, क्या कहते हैं, क्या है ये, क्यों बनाया है, इतने रंग क्यों गिराए हैं या कम रंग क्यों गिराए हैं, बॉडी है, एक फॉर्म है, एक कृष्ण जी बांसुरी बजा रहे हैं, वो तो समझ में आता सबको, पर वो रंगों के एक एब्स्ट्रैक्शन में जो नहीं समझ में आता है, that becomes a huge journey for us as artists also. Just like in especially contemporary dance, I think there is a certain connect. But then I think every yug, every age, there is a connection between the artist of that yug, of that samay. It's not about yug dharma. It's about how your own metaphors, if you like, will be shared metaphors, will be almost shared experiences. That's why you will find that music of a certain age, dance of a certain age, era, is very similar. There are because similar experiences you relate to them, and then what comes out is, there is a certain connection. So it's not bikra ho raha hai, thought it's alright. I would like to, because I do believe in multimedia, I do believe in multidisciplinary approach, and that's the whole thing of my own work is very multidisciplinary. I don't really think, because I've done dance and done music, so I don't really think in terms of only painting. I do think in terms of how the colors that I'm creating, or like there's one painting of mine, I just brought it, night love or something, which I've created in this sawan ka mausam, but it is not green, it is red. It is red. It's a beautiful shade of red, and it is supposed to be set in an amrai, in a mango, and there is a hidden koel in it. But only when I tell people that देखो ये कोयल है, only then they understand it. It's a higher thing. Once I explain it, once I talk about it, then people understand it. Then they say, हाँ यार आम पका हुआ होगा और शाम के सूरज की जो रोशनी होगी तो एक इसमें आम के पेड़ पे ऐसा होगा तो कोयल भी होगी नजर आएगी. But only when I explain it. So that is which I think is a huge limitation for us as contemporary artists, and which I'm sure Shakti will kind of agree with, that this is something which we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And yet, we still try. My way of circumventing is that I try to put longish captions, because obviously I'm a writer, so I have the ability and the arrogance, if you like, of being able to express myself in words. So I do make longish captions. I do try to share with the audience. Even मेरा नजरिया ये है, जब मैंने ये बनाया था, And what you see and how you experience it, how you are able to distill it in your mind is really, really up to you. So this whole body-mind connect is so much to do, as far as contemporary art is concerned, not so much me, is as to how you relate to it. I am very fond of saying that abstract painting always is timeless. It is. Because it's about how you respond to art or that particular piece every time you look at it. It's like there's this beautiful saying in Hindi, Rag Rasoi Pagdi, Kabhu Nahi Grand, which means a rag or any gana or any music or the pagdi, the way you tie a pagdi and the way you cook the same dish will never taste the same. Rag Rasoi Pagdi, Kabhu Nahi Grand. So I think I think Shonaji said about how you do the same piece. You can do the same piece and it will be different every time. And how the audience interprets it, how you interpret it, how just what Gita said that, oh, this why did I do it this way? You know, I have understood it now 20 years later when I first done that piece. So it's the same way about abstract art. I feel when you look at a particular painting, it should, because you grow, your perception, perspective changes. So that you bring that changed perspective, growth, quote unquote, to your vision, to your seeing or experiencing that art. And that I think makes that art more sort of more contemporary, maybe new, in a sense. Because every time you're different. I don't like, much as I like classical dance, I don't like any figurative art in my space, in my room. I hate any figurative art because it's like having another person, another body in my room. I don't know whether I'm going to explain myself on this one. I just can't bear it. I think I'm unable to connect to another body in that same room in the form of painting. So it's like that. It's when the dance comes in, and then it's happening here, right? And then after that Ghoda of sense, I was not climbing onto my head, it's just sitting there on that painting. And yet I was unable to relate to it at that point of time because that dance or that Ghoda is happening in my head. And I'm bringing to my perception that dance. So I think as I get very carried away, I think I should leave this space open for a discussion.
Thank you, Akash. I think all I can lovingly think at the end of all these presentations, the talks, is that I was hoping that at the end of it, I will have some clarity about how body and mind connects. But now I realize that it's actually even more complex than what we would have thought really. First of all, you referred to Achan Marathi and you talked about Viju Marathi. And I've seen performances where there is no movement. You're sitting on the stage and through just your dancing eyes, you create that kind of rhythm, you create that kind of presence on the stage where without music you listen to music. Without dance, you perceive the movements. And how does it happen? It happens through the mind. It happens not through the body really. Yes, I'm actually going to go to you really now. So it becomes the body, Gita, you mentioned that. By the time the mind comes, you begin to understand the body is 10 years older. But then, is body so important? Is it so relevant in terms of really doing what you want to project? So I think there are many ideas which have come here. And how to connect to the audience, because ultimately, no art can exist in isolation. It has to interact with the audiences. So I think on this note, the discussion is now open to the panelists. Either you wanted to say something and then... may I just say, we have very eminent people present here. Kamalji, you are there. Leela, you. And if you want to add at any time, please feel free.
When we're talking about these great artists, we also have to understand that they have delved into every aspect of the art form. It's not possible to create magic without that happening. So Biju Maharaj ji can sing himself, he can play the tabla, he can play the pakhavaj, he can compose something right then and there. That kind of level of understanding can only create that kind of magic. You see, so I think to transcend the body, you need to engage with every aspect of the art form. If Kiru Babu did Jagannath ji, he lived and breathed for Jagannath ji. So that credibility and that lifestyle that they had, which showed in the dance. So I think it's easily said that you can sit and create magic and all that, but that's possible only and only if and you'll see less and less of this happening as we proceed, because I don't see very many people who are complete performers, artists. Because my teacher, for example, could play the veena for 3 hours. She was Tiger Varadachari student in music. She could sing a concert for 3 hours, and she could dance. So that level of artistry and that level of understanding of poetry, of languages, she could speak and write all 4 South Indian languages plus Sanskrit. So where do you see that kind of scholarship to be able to, scholarship and artistic excellence to be able to create that kind of, so it's as we are proceeding, we are getting more performance oriented. We are getting more stakes oriented as we are learning. The first question after 3 years, every child has to ask is, when am I going on stage? Nobody is enjoying the process. Nobody is wanting to engage in the process and say how the process is going to enrich you, and ultimately you will see the outcome of the process. That process, enriching in the process and investing in the process is what can make thinking and bodiless dancers.
That's instant coffee का ज़माना for you, Everybody wants instant coffee. मेरा अरंगेत्रम कब है? After 4 years, अरंगेत्रम.
By getting the students, there are teachers who are
Parents
are pushing their children to it, right?
I just want to add, I agree with what you said, but in the context of this mapping of Kathak villages I've been going around, in the villages I've found many people, which we call the Panchapatiya, who are very good in playing music, writing poetry, blah, 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 blah. But something is missing, which doesn't take us or the viewer or the Rasika to that height, which we are talking about other artists that we just named, something. So what is it? There is that extra something. So one has to also take that into account. Secondly, what also came to my mind just now was that when I've been teaching, the environment that we are living in is so different that the children they really have a body and mind disconnect with what we as classical artists are portraying. राधा जा रही है मटकी लेकर के, और मटकी लेकर के जा रही है, उसकी कर्वेचर जो है, बॉडी की कर्वेचर कैसी होनी चाहिए when you're carrying a मटकी over here, और या मटकी को आप पानी से भरे, then how heavy it become, how you should take that. Would you believe it that one day I had to get a मटकी in class?